Hello students, welcome to this brief introductory session on T.S. Eliot's essay Tradition and Individual Talent. Students, in this session we will talk about life and works of T.S. Eliot and the salient features of his literary criticism along with a brief introduction with his essay Tradition and Individual Talent. So let's get started. Students, the full name of T.S. Eliot is Thomas Stearns Eliot. Thomas Stearns Eliot is considered to be a towering figure in the field of 20th century literature and criticism. Students, this versatile genius was a poet, playwright, essayist, and literary critic. He was born on September 26, 1888 at St. Louis, USA. Students, he is an America-born British poet, and in 1914 he moved to England. He studied at Sorbonne in Paris and Merton College, Oxford. Students, from 1917 to 1919, he worked as an assistant editor of the very famous literary magazine, The Egoist. And by 1917, he established himself as a poet with the publication of his first collection of poems, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock and Other Poems. But he achieved celebrity with the publication of his poem The Waste Land in 1922. He became the director for the publishers Faber and Faber in 1925. As he moved to Britain in 1914, but in 1927 he became the citizen, formal or official citizen of Britain, and he renounced his American citizenship. And this great literary artist received Nobel Prize in Literature in 1948. He died in 1965 in London. We have a look at his famous works. First, we'll talk about his poems. His famous poems or collections of poems are his first publication, Prufrock and Other Observations. Then his The Waste Land, which was published in 1922, is considered to be the most influential literary piece of 20th century. Then in 1927, he got published with another collection, Aerial Poems. In 1930, Ash Wednesday, and in 1935 to 1940, he got his 4-quartet published. And along with poetry, his poetic dramas are also very famous, and he is known for his special contribution in the revival of poetic drama. He wrote many poetic dramas, but the famous ones are Murder in the Cathedral, which was written in 1935, then Family Reunion in 1939, and The Cocktail Party 1949. Besides being a poet and a dramatist, he is a well-known name in the field of literary criticism also. As far as his essays in literary criticism are, some famous essays are Tradition and Individual Talent, The Metaphysical Poets, Frontiers of Criticism, The Function of Criticism, The Three Voices of Poetry, and another one, The Music of Poetry. He wrote innumerable pieces on literary criticism. These are just to name a few. His essays in literary criticism speak a volume about his role as a literary criticism and his contribution in the field of criticism. Students, these essays show that he is one of the long line of poet critics which stretches right from Ben Jonson to our day, and it includes such names as Dryden, Dr. Johnson, Coleridge, and Matthew Arnold. Though he did not formulate any comprehensive theory of poetry, he was a conscious poet who had thought long and deep about the mysteries of his own art, and his critical essays, his reviews, his editorial contributions, all his commentaries on criticism, they throw a flood of light on his own view of poetry, and an understanding of his poetic creed is interesting and desirable because he is the only critic after Wordsworth who has much to say about poetry and the poetic criticism. And his criticism comes from his own poetic workshop, as in his essay The Frontiers of Criticism he remarks that his criticism is a byproduct of my private poetry workshop, or a prolongation of the thinking that went into the formation of my own verse. So this is how his criticism has its significance just because of his role as a creative artist, as a poet. And as far as his special contribution in the field of literary criticism is concerned, he is known for these four concepts. First is objective correlative, then there is dissociation of sensibility, then idea of tradition, and impersonal theory of poetry. Students, the essay which is prescribed for your syllabus, Tradition and Individual Talent, it talks about his idea of tradition with reference to creative talent, and in this very essay he talks about the impersonal theory of poetry. We will talk about both these concepts in detail in further videos. And as far as this essay, Traditional and Individual Talent, is concerned, it was first published in 1919 in the literary journal The Egoist, and later it was published in Eliot's first volume on criticism, The Sacred Wood, Essays on Poetry and Criticism. And it is considered to be the most celebrated critical essay in the field of 20th century literary criticism. And this essay is known as a manifesto of Eliot's critical creed. Students, this essay is divided into three parts. In the first part, Eliot talks in detail about the concept of tradition with reference to creative process, with reference to poetic process. And in the second part, he talks about his unique theory of impersonal poetry, which is in complete contrast to William Wordsworth's theory of poetry. Then thirdly, he just concludes his ideas or concepts on the role of tradition and individual talent in poetic process. So in our next video, we'll talk about his concept of tradition. Thank you.